Alright, so the other night I was watching this documentary all about bourbon and how it's made and the history and yada yada yada. And there was this comment made by, I think it was a master distiller, that bourbon is the single most restrictive spirit category in the entire world. Now, while that might technically be true, I do think that that really depends a lot on how exactly you define that, and it might be a little bit of word games, if I'm being honest. Because today, I want to introduce you to a category of American spirit and the cocktail that bears its name that, while being completely different from bourbon, having completely different rules, I think is every bit just as restrictive as the rules surrounding bourbon. And if you're scratching your head wondering what kind of extremely restrictive spirit category from America do I not know about, remember, I just said America. I didn't say North America, because this is from south of the equator. Of course, the spirit I've been talking about is a type of South American brandy called Pisco, and specifically Peruvian Pisco. Now, Pisco is also made in Argentina, but the rules regarding its production in that country are so much less restrictive as to practically put the Argentinian spirit in a category of its own, which is hilarious considering the story I'm going to share with you. Oh yes, and we return to Regarding Cocktails by Sasha Petraske for today's recipe, the Pisco Sour, by far the most well-known Pisco cocktail here in the United States. Often you'll see recipes for the Pisco Sour calling for lemon and lime juice, but this version only uses lemon. Okay, so based on my research, it seems as though the differences between the two rule sets regarding Pisco production are so contentious as to lead Peru to basically claim that Argentine Pisco is fake Pisco and cannot even be sold within Peru's borders. There is some interesting history involved in the discussion of whether such a claim is legitimate, but for today I'm not going to get into any of that. Instead, I'm going to tell you the story of my brother's imaginary friend, Jose. Now, I have a huge family. How huge? Large enough that people automatically assume that we were either raised Roman Catholic, Mormon, or as part of some weird cult you've never heard of, and everybody is usually pretty disappointed to learn that we're just your boring old garden variety evangelical Christians. But the point is, there are a lot of us, and we are all pretty close. So when my oldest brother started talking about his new Peruvian friend Jose, we all naturally assumed that at least one of us would at some point get to meet him. But more and more time started to pass without anybody in the family actually getting to meet him, regardless of the fact that my brother seemed to be consistently going on more and more adventures with this guy, each one more exciting than the last. It seemed he or his wife could hardly tell a story anymore without reference to my friend Jose. Naturally, we all started to wonder if perhaps our brother had been getting a little too enamored of the Peruvian parsley and maybe had begun to lose it a little bit. Perhaps there was no Jose after all. At first, we merely questioned when we would get to meet him. When it seemed that this only resulted in convenient excuses why Jose couldn't make it to various functions at the last minute, we knew there was no Jose. We began to refer to this Jose as fake Jose, in hopes that such a blunt rebuttal of my brother's delusions might shock him back to reality. But the delusions still continued. He swore up and down that Jose was real and that someday we would get to meet him. But nearly 2 years passed, and yet that momentous day never seemed to draw any closer. Finally, my brother invited me to accompany him and Jose to go mountain biking. At last, I thought, I can finally get my brother to admit that this has all been nothing more than a childish game, and we can finally all stop hearing about this fake Jose. Imagine my surprise that fateful morning when, lo and behold, into my driveway pulled a car carrying 2 men, my brother and a stranger behind the wheel. I loaded my bike and gear in a state of shock. Was fake Jose real after all? My inner reflections were violently ended, however, as soon as we set off. This man, Jose or whoever he was a madman. Sheer terror gripped me as we rocketed down country lanes, careened around corners, and generally left me feeling closer to eternity than at any other point in my soon-to-be-over young life. I was granted some reprieve when, upon reaching the highway, Jose allowed the self-driving feature to take over, rotated in his seat to more comfortably converse with my brother and I, and ignored the road completely. Believe it or not, this was much, much less stressful as a passenger. Upon some quick reflection of my times in Mexico and Morocco, I came to the conclusion that this man definitely learned to drive, and I use that term loosely here, in a nation other than the United States. It also seemed to be the simplest explanation that I and my entire family had been mistaken after all evidence to the contrary notwithstanding. And so I freely admit, Jose, you are real. But next time, I might drive separately. All right, well, this will be my first taste of Pisco and my first Pisco Sour, which I suppose goes without saying, but all right, cheers. The heck did I just drink? Okay, whoa. So, I'm a little bit speechless because I don't really have like a comparison. This is so different. I'm gonna go for another one. Well, I can definitely say that Pisco is one of the most unique things I've ever tasted. So because the only reference point I had is that it's technically a brandy, I guess that's more what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be sweeter. It's really dry. There's not a lot of sweetness there, and it's way thinner. It doesn't have that sort of unctuous mouthfeel of a brandy or a cognac. The cocktail has a lot of cinnamon and, of course, all the baking spice flavors from the Angostura, but smelling the Pisco by itself, it has a lot of fruitiness that kind of reminds me of a silver or plata cachaça, which of course they share a similar production method. There's like a dirty funk kind of like from certain mezcals that you'll get, and the more I think about that mezcal flavor, it reminds me a lot of a tequila, but it's so different from anything I've had. I do think that this would be better with lime and maybe a little bit more sugar. If I were to do this again, I would probably do half and 1 ounce, so half lime, half lemon, and 1 ounce of simple syrup. But yeah, I don't know. This is so just blowing my mind right now. I've never tasted anything, really anything that tastes like this. It's hard to decide whether I'm in love with it or I hate it or I'm ambivalent. I don't know. It's weird. So to answer the question, what the heck is Pisco, or I don't know how to say it? Anybody from Peru want to tell me how to pronounce this properly? I would appreciate it. So like I said, this shares a production similarity with cachaça in that it is distilled one time and it has to be bottled at the exact same proof that it comes off the still. So you have to get everything exactly right the first time. It's also extremely restricted on which kinds of grape that you can use and exactly how high or low you can distill it. At least in Peru, I believe it has to be aged in a neutral container, so stainless steel or glass. You can't wood age it, so pretty much whatever comes off the still is basically what the product is going to taste like there on out. So the amount of skill required in the fermentation and distillation process is off the charts because you have one shot to get it right in your fermentation, and then you have one shot to get it right in your distillation. And if you mess up any part of those very precise processes, you're gonna end up with a crap product. So like I said at the beginning of the video, if you play some semantics, you can say that bourbon is more restrictive because there's a greater quantity of rules regarding bourbon and its production. But there's actually a lot more freedom in making bourbon because you can change your mash bill to almost anything as long as it's 51% corn, made in the USA, and you hit these sort of broad ranges of distillation, but you can distill it as many times as you want. So I'm not blown away on my first introduction to this category of spirit, but I am looking forward to trying more of them and trying some different recipes. I know there's another recipe in regarding cocktails that uses Pisco, so I'm looking forward to giving that a try, although I'm going to wait till strawberries are in season, so it'll be a few months before that comes out. But thank you guys for watching, and go get yourself a bottle of Pisco. It's worth trying, at least once.